Okay, I'm going to start. The construction of popular power in Colombia, the experience of agro-food and territories. We are part of a social and political organization in Colombia called the People's Congress. The People Congress brings together regional, sectorial, grassroots organizations, including process, peasant, Afro-descendant, indigenous, urban workers, women, youth, among others. People Congress is a mass social and political movement in Colombia that, through self-organizing, intends to build people power. We look forward to build together with other peoples around the world an internationalist alternative against patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. I want to show you where is Colombia. I want to share you a map. Um, because don't everybody knows where is Colombia. Um, Colombia is Colombia is a country that is part of the American continent and specifically of the subcontinent of South America. It's located in the extreme northwest with an area of more than 1 million square kilometers, has access to the Pacific Ocean to the west and the Caribbean Sea to the north, besides having in our territory part of the Amazon. The Colombian population, according to 2021 estimates, is 51 million inhabitants, distributed mainly in the urban centers like Bogotá, Medellín, Cali, and Barranquilla. Our population has communities that recognize themselves as indigenous, representing 36% of the total population according to 2080 data, and self-recognized Afro-descendant communities representing 9% who mainly inhabit area of natural protection. Colombia, as well of all of Latin America, has a geopolitical value for the capitalist economy and the powers that are currently in a multipolar dispute, such as the United States, China, and Russia, for example, who see our regions as a source of natural resources. Mining resources such as gold, copper, lithium, coltan, among other minerals necessary for the corporate energy transition. And common goods for subsistence, such as biodiversity, large tracts of forest, large rivers, and freshwater source, and energy resources such as oil, coal, gas, and wind and solar resources among other raw materials that have been intensively exploited, generating a primary export model based on royalties that thus don't generate added value and only benefits transnational corporations through weak and almost non-existent environmental tax and labor legislation, and benefits political elites that plunder states through corrupt policies. At the political level, it has historically been characterized as a country governed by a conservative, degraded, and corrupt right wing that is aligned with the interests of the United States, which has a strong interference and interventionism in the country, which is expressed with the installation of 7 military bases distributed throughout the national territory, with diverse military support in training, armament, and incidents in security policies, mainly the anti-drug policy and the military doctrine of the internal enemy, which since 2001 with the Plan Colombia has focuses on the attack of rural communities and their forms of production and programs disguised as social policies. In other words, militarization in Colombia has increased with the excuse of the fight against drugs, but it has become a persecution, criminalization, and repression of rural and community social organizations. Um, uh, Tradition and struggle and social organization. In the midst of this context, our country is also characterized by a long tradition of political and social struggle that has been carried out by both rural and urban communities. Sectors such as peasant sector with National Association of Peasant Users and currently the National Agrarian Coordinator and National Federation of Agricultural Unitary Trade Unions at the union with Central Unitary Worker Unions and its articulation by sectors such as teachers, oil industry workers whose union is the Oil Union Workers, which is 100 years old. All of these are organizations with more than 50 years of organization and struggle. And in the recent years, numerous territorial organizations have emerged of urban dwellers, women and feminists, which respond to new social and political dynamics, but which arise from the need to solve fundamental needs such as housing, health, or education, and to confront the consequence of neoliberalism in Colombia and the militarization to which we are subjected by the elites, companies, and the international capital. There is also a tradition of guerrilla struggle, including several of Marxist-Leninist and Guevarist ideology, which emerged in the 16th of the 20th century and have participated in different political negotiations in the framework of several peace processes in the 80s, 90s, and 20s. The last and best known peace processes ended in 2016 with the signing of a peace agreement with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, which, despite achieving the disarmament of more than 4,000 combatants and reducing violence in several regions of the country, has been systematically breached by the government of Ivan Duque. He was president from 2018 to August 2022, and has led to the rearmament of the dissident sector of the FARC, the guerrilla, exacerbating the confrontation and giving new life to drug trafficking and paramilitary structures. Additionally, there is in Colombia the National Liberation Army, ELN, guerrilla in Colombia, which maintains its action and presence in territory and is currently resuming dialogues with the current government of Gustavo Petro. To complete the picture of the war in Colombia, it's necessary to point out that there are paramilitary groups which operate as contra-insurgency and anti-communist private armies in collaboration with the state army. The paramilitaries are financed and supported by right-wing governments and capitalist sectors of large landowners and cattle ranchers who own large tracts of unprotected land, which is why their military target in the peasant organization that have fought for decades for the redistribution of land. The policies of the School of the Americas in the United States since the 1980s has imposed paramilitaries and has taken the war to such a level of degradation that they have committed hundreds of massacres against the civilian population, torture, rapes, disappearance, massive displacement, and crimes against humanity. In Colombia, we have 7 millions of people displacement, more than 8,000 political prisoners, um, 200,000 people disappeared, and like that. such as playing one of the more terrorifical scene in our war was when the paramilitaries playing soccer with a human head in front of an entire community, for example. These paramilitaries are currently armed groups that cross their interests with the drug trafficking, with exercise territorial control based on fear and the destruction of the social fabric of the communities. Colombia rurality cannot be understood from a merely economical dimension. In order to understand rural Colombia, it's necessary to understand the integral nature of what territory means for the communities. The agrarian conflict is a historical constant that has its origin in the inequalities in the forms of production in the regions, the erosion of fragile ecosystem due to intensive agricultural practices, the establishment of a mechanization model in the countryside based on agrochemicals and machinery that weakens the soil, limits economic production, and in-depth the peasantry. To the other elements of the conflict is the imposition of projects in the territories by action of the multinationals who benefit from the dirty war of expropriation. These extractivist activities range from monoculture, as in the case of sugarcane or oil palm, mainly produced for agrofuel, coal or oil exploitation, minerals, or hydroelectric projects that contradict the previous occupation. The last agricultural census of 2014 showed an increase in the concentration of land considered suitable for agricultural activities. Now, in the last decades, the struggle for the land in Colombia has taken a step of complexify the understanding of peasant life. And if the redistribution of land is still a demand, the respect for water sources and the possibility of taking care of the forest and the species of plants and animals that are there. In this sense, they have gone from a struggle for access to land ownership toward a more holistic approach. How to generate a productive economy that coexists with the environment, how to defend and care for the peasant culture and small-scale food production, how to appropriate technologies, how to transform food, and how to improve the relationship of distribution of the cities. In the other words, we have moved from the struggle for land to the defense of the territory. It's understand that the territory is a social fabric of collective and community social relations and of the human being with nature, which has produced a specific form of culture according to the ecosystem. In Colombia, the peasant culture near large rivers in the Caribbean zone is different from the peasant culture that lived in the Andes at 2,500 meters above sea level, where it's cold, or the peasant culture of the savannas where humidity is very high. And each territory has its specific climatic, social, and cultural characteristics. There, the peasantry has produced a differential form of production and local economy. Now I'm going to speak about specifically about agro-alimentary peasant territories, a proposal of territory for a dignified life. The history of Colombia is the history of its social, political, and armed conflict. Therefore, it's also the history of the peoples who have resisted colonization and the imposition of capitalism. It's necessary to understand that in Colombia, there are indigenous communities that have less than 40 years of contact with the West, that the Afro-descendant peoples, Maroons, were learning in the depths of the jungle for decades to escape slavery in the 19th century, while the mestizos were moving further and further in search of land and peace. This reality led the people to practice self-management far from the centralist state of Bogota, that is the capital city. To this day, there are large tracts of land where the only state presence is the army. Indigenous, Afro-descendant, and Mestizo people have had to coexist, learn from their mutual values, and establish form of self-government. This is what we at the People Congress call popular power. There are various forms of territorial organization, indigenous councils, Afro-descendant community councils, peasant reserve some with varying degrees of legal recognition, and the agro-food peasant territories, which are the autonomous form of organization, the territory for food production without state recognition. These territories are an integral response to long-standing problems such as land concentration, the configuration of the centralized white land-owning elite supported by a state that has generated public policies against the peasant economy. They are an economic, social, environmental, and cultural proposal that seeks to respond to a series of problems linked to violence, dispossession, inequality, and state neglect. There are currently 8 agro-food peasant territories in the national territory. In the Departamento of Nariño, in the south of country, are 3. In Arauca, frontier with Venezuela, are 4. And the Nariño Cauca in the south mountains of the country is 1. In economic terms, the agro-food peasant territories articulate the production of food processing to give greater added value, the possible distribution and commercialization of the products, and the consumption of healthy and clean foods for the peasant population itself. This integral scheme seeks to improve the income of rural workers as well as to generate greater virtuous circle in the care of the soil through agroecological restorative agriculture, or at least the orderly decrease in the use of agrochemicals. In the same way, the economic proposal that incorporates the agro-food peasant territories seek to improve the profitability of food production through associative forms with cooperatives and solidarity economy, which reduce the cost of intermediation. In this sense, it understands that the economy is not only the generation of income in monetary terms, but also the improvement of production condition and the improvement of the collective living condition of food producers. In environmental terms, the agro-food territories integrates the restoration of watersheds, the restoration of the soil and its chemical and organic components, the recovery of productive practices that are less harmful to nature and human health. In its sense, in this sense, it combines technical and technological innovation that may come from the technical and university education of young farmers or people who are linked to organizational processes, and the wisdom and knowledge of farmers who have inherited other types of effective, efficient, and ecological sustainable practices. By combining this economical perspective with the environmental perspective, we can understand the territorial perspective proposed by the agro-food peasant territories. Territories is not reduced to the amount of land that peasant families can access, nor to the technical support that comes from the state, nor to the amount of food that this economy can produce, nor to the credits that can be accessed to generate income, as the classic agrarian reform perspective had it. Rather, it includes care of the soil, care of the for water, care for the health of those who work the land, and the integration of organizational grassroots to improve the quality of life of men, women, boys, and girls, and above all, are to articulate action to link and connect peasant production with consumption in the cities. And we say that without economic autonomy, there is not political autonomy. It's important to highlight that the agro-food peasant territories are a form of territorial management ensured and peasant organization that have been involved for years and decades in political resistance to extractive projects, war, systematic abandoned by the state, and other types of projects that threaten the existence and integrity of these peasant communities. Thus, the social base of the agro-food peasant territories are autonomous organizations which have political assembly forms with unpaid collective works called mingas, convites, or manuelta, that is solidarity work between families, and exist health, culture, women's committees, and other types of activities that are developed in rural community life. Similarly, these peasant organizations are politically articulate in regional and national scenarios of political dispute against the state and against the sectors of loud-owning capitalism or neoliberal capitalism that seek to dispose them through economic policies, contrary to the territorial proposals. The National Agrarian Coordinator, the People Congress, and the Peasant Ethnic and Popular Agrarian Summit are some of the popular political scenarios from which the Colombian states has been questioned and large-scale political initiatives have been generated proposing new models for the country. Those agro-food peasant territories are a proposal to maintain the economic autonomy of organized peasant communities and to materialize initiatives and alternatives in rural regions. They are initiatives to power in the territory of popular power. In spite of defending and shaping political autonomy, peasant organizations don't intend to renounce to public funding from the state, but rather to develop models of public community management that respect the political form of the organization while at the same time making public use of the state resources. The social conflict is often expressed in large mobilizations, road blockades, and strike, the most famous being the popular uprising of 2021, when thousands of people from the rural but also urban excluded sectors took the streets for more than 8 weeks. In the mobilization, the guards, indigenous, maroon, peasant, and some form of urban wards are visible. The word in everyday life is a community body for the protection of the territory, which in many cases goes hand in hand with a system of justice autonomous from the state courts. Armed with a baton, whose purpose is to represent the community authority that is given to each guard. This authority is revocable and it's based on the legitimacy of the popular power constituted in the territory.
2 minutes, Sandra, please. Thank you.
Finally, we want to talk about the power people is to save life. What we call popular power, we know the Zapatistas call it good government, than in Kurdistan, it's called democratic confederalism, is nothing more than the self-determination of the people who in their wisdom knows that the state is the instrument of those who seek the dominate them. Today in Colombia, there is a government considered progressive, and we hope and we will make every effort to make it the opportunity to consolidate popular power, which according to us in the only one capable of turning history around. We are blessed to be able to share with you today because we know that the possibilities for peoples to free themselves from the colonial and imperialism yoke depend of their capacity to articulate, to organize, and to struggle side by side toward a common horizon. And it in this kind of space, in the land of such strength and pain as Palestine, that we can build common dreams to change the trajectory of the history of humanity. Um,